This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Detective work in ancient Judah. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. That will be the subject of our discussion today. Actually, we're talking archaeology this week because, as you know, archaeology is cool. But before we dive in, please take a moment and if you've not already done so, please download our app. If you're watching on YouTube, God bless you. Subscribe, share that link around. We will stay on this virtual Mars hill as long as we can. But you never know. I mean, it's their sandbox, their rules. Day may come where they decide we said something that they just will not allow. We'll do it deliberately, not trying to be provocative or clickbait-y, not saying anything that we can't substantiate with evidence, but you never know. A couple times already, they've gone back in the archives and found things that just are not allowed on this platform. So if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment either before or after this program to download our app. You'll get it at gilberthouse.org/app. It's free, available for iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle, Fire phones, tablets. We've even got Roku and Apple TV versions of the app. Again, it is free. The advantage of the mobile app is you also get a calendar of our upcoming events, a calendar of our upcoming Bible study readings, all of our content, video and audio, including the archives going back to 2005 in one handy platform. And again, it is free. Plus, we've got the new messaging feature where you can join in discussions on the various programs and ask for prayer, share thoughts on whatever, all of that inside the app, not out on the internet. So gilberthouse.org/app. There's also a link to download it at VFTB.net. Our guest this week is a gentleman we had the pleasure and really the honor of spending a day with back in March. Sharon and I on our Israel tour, we went a few days early along with Doug and Janelle Van Dorn, and Aaron Lipkin coordinated a pre-tour expedition to the Golan Heights, where we visited Gilgal Refaim and the Serpent Mound of Bashane. That's not the official name, but that's what we call it, with the archaeologist who's done the most recent excavations there back in between 2006 and about 2012, if I remember the dates correctly. I'll double check that and make sure I get that right for the show notes. But anyway, his doctoral dissertation is on this very subject, Megalithic Architecture of the Near East, Case Study of the Golan. He focused on the megalithic structures on the Golan Heights. Now, many people have heard of Gilgal Refaim, but there are three other structures that are very similar to it, not quite as large, but very similar. And it's, as it turns out, many of the megalithic burials there are of similar construction. We'll talk with him about this on a future program. Right now, he's got an active dig south of Jerusalem near Hebron. It is roughly halfway between Jerusalem and Beersheba. It is a site called Tel Bet Mirsim. Was first excavated almost a century ago by one of the giants of archaeology. I mean, we're not talking Nephilim giants here. We're talking just a man of great stature, a pioneer in the field of biblical archaeology, William F. Albright. And our guest this week has returned to that site, and we'll see what he turns up here. It's an interesting discussion. This will be almost a presentation for you. He's got a PhD in archaeology from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, with which he is still affiliated, and it's our honor to welcome to the program Dr. Michael Freikman. Mike, it's good to see you again, and we really appreciated the fact that you took an entire day out of your schedule and showed us around the sites at Rujim El Hiri, Gilgal Refaim, that serpent-shaped ridge nearby, and the fascinating sites there. And in the future, we'll talk about that. But you've got a dig site that you're working on right now that again is just sort of illustrating the history of the Holy Land, the history of Israel, ancient Canaan, Palestine, whatever we want to call it. What is this site and why is it so important?
So today we're going to speak about the father of biblical archaeology, if you like. Two fathers, the man and the site. And we're speaking about Tel Bet Mirsim, which is located in southern Israel, halfway between Beersheba and Jerusalem. And actually, it might be one of the most important archaeological tales. It's much more than just a tale for understanding the whole history of biblical archaeology, how actually archaeologists come to study, the Bible with, as they say, with the shovel in one hand and the Bible in the other hand. I'm not ashamed. Today is so, not it's supposed to be outdated, but I'm not ashamed of this. I still believe in being very, very careful, but still I tend to hold the Bible in my left hand and the shovel in my right hand. I think this is the right way to excavate ancient sites in Israel of these periods. So Talbot Mirsim, which actually it's a tricky way to translate it from Arabic, it's something like tale of a slowly running horse. It would be like that. And it was excavated by probably the most influential archaeologist in the last 150 years, William Albright. The American Institute of Archaeology in Jerusalem bears his name, and not only that, he was again being careful. He actually was one of the fathers of modern scientific archaeology, both in the field and in the lab. And by the way, it's very easy to criticize these men like 100 years after with all our experience, and I tend not to do this. It's still kind of a mystery why he actually chose to excavate these really forgotten site, unlike Jerusalem and Lachish and Samaria or Gezer, all famous biblical cities. This one we still don't really know how it was called in the Bible, or even whether it's mentioned in the Bible at all. And yet he chose to excavate this site, and we shall see that the results were so important that even by the 70s, 60s and the 70s, every student in Israel, or not only in Israel, on his BA studying archaeology, had to memorize all the strata, all the layers in the site by heart. It was that important. So actually, Albright was not alone. If you don't mind, I will load the short. If you can enable the sharing, please.
Let me see. Thought I had it here. Let me see if we've got that.
You're the host, so.
Yeah, I've got to do it.
Yes, I think. All right.
There we go. And we are allowing it. Okay.
Cool. So what you see here is the aerial photograph of Talbot Mirsim. You can see quite well the wall, the fortification walls surrounding the site, especially in the lower part of it. And in the very center, you can actually see the tiny area that we started excavating in 2021. Half, or maybe 30% of this tell was excavated almost to the ground, to the bedrock by Albright. Actually, he was not alone in this project. His colleagues were Kelso, for instance, from Senya Theological College, and others like Kyle, especially Kyle, who wrote a book about the excavation itself. You all right?
Yeah, just making sure I've got the right setting over on this side.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. So Kyle and Kelso helped him, and by the way, thanks to this, there's a small museum with a quite nice exhibition of finds from Talbot Mirsim in Pittsburgh. Senya College is now located in Pittsburgh. It used to be in St. Louis back those days. In fact, we think, but we have to figure it out. We think now that Albright chose this place because he thought it was the biblical Kiryat Sefer. Kiryat Sefer, today we know it should be located somewhere near Hebron, but Kiryat Sefer should be translated from ancient Hebrew as the site of the letters. And he was hoping to find an archive with the letters, of course.
Sure.
Well, it didn't happen, and today we don't really know that Kiryat Sefer is actually should be located, as I said, somewhere east from this place, and we don't have really idea how to how exactly this place was called. Maybe it's the place called Ashan in the Bible, but we hope to clarify this matter. Anyway, Albright found some 10 layers. Today we know even more than that, but 10 different cities located one above the other, starting somewhere in 2000 or even before 2000 BC, like almost 4,000 years of history. And the last city today we know it was ruined by it was demolished by the army of Sennacherib, the Syrian army in 701 BC. Very famous invasion that actually almost put the end to the kingdom of Judah. Yes.
Yeah,
so,
we read about this in the Bible where they're telling the men of Hezekiah on the wall saying, speak in Aramaic because we understand it. Don't speak in Hebrew because we don't want the people to be scared.
It's first psychological warfare.
Yes.
Because he wants to speak Hebrew. He wants people to understand him.
Right, right.
Kind of a propaganda and online propaganda. We know from the Syrian sources, we know Sennacherib himself praising himself for burning down 50 cities and villages around Jerusalem. And then he says something like, and Hezekiah I put as a bird in the cage, which is actually, again, this is propaganda, which means I was not able to conquer Jerusalem. It depends how you read the text and how you write the text. Beit Mirsim was one of the sites, one of the cities that was totally ruined by this guy. And some 1,500 years later, even more, Albright arrives here. Actually, in the lower part of the picture, this is the place where his, give or take, this is where his camp was located. It's almost as spectacular as excavating the site itself. And we are now trying to compare the old photographs and the plans of Albright in order to establish the location of his camp and to excavate it. Like excavating the excavators, not just excavators, the excavator. Look, it's almost like holy relics, from the early Christian age, because again, Albright is the greatest of them all. We have a couple of pictures here. You can see Albright himself working with his iPhone, I guess. You can see holding holding his tablet, working with his documents. And the picture, you can see actually the camp itself. And by the way, really thanks God that we have the conditions we have today, because it was really horrible when I think about this, with all the flies and heat that didn't end, at the end of the excavation day. It followed them through the night. I believe it was I excavated like this few weeks, and it was really harsh. They hold several complete seasons like this, and really these men giants. The first archaeological car. By the way,
this is why I say God. This is why I say God bless you, archaeologists, because when we were in Israel in 2019, we went in May, and it was very, very hot, and I very nearly suffered heat stroke at Dan, and then again at Petra. So I can't imagine spending weeks at a time in that kind of heat, especially in the month of August, as you're going to do. So God bless you.
Heat, it's hard for first 50 years. Then you get used to it. You can see here a couple of pictures. This is one of the areas that he excavated. As I said, he excavated strata from, as he called this not as he called this, the city of Judea of the First Temple period. And we see part of it in the picture, and going down to earliest Canaanite cities and even below. Now, you can see the camp at the background of the photograph, and then you can see, I hope you can see the red arrow pointing in some spot behind this area. This is where we excavate now. Okay, this is our excavation, and again, you can see here people dumping thousands of buckets from the area. And again, you can see here the red arrow pointing at the photograph we saw, okay, one slide before. So
we've lost your audio, Mike. I can't hear you all of a sudden. Lost your audio. I cannot hear you. So, there we go.
Okay. I hope the connection will be all right. So again, it's quite exciting. Excavate, really next door to the greatest archaeologist, in history of Israel. So actually, you can see just under the shade, you can see the large stones that belong to the city wall of the Judaic city. We shall see it right now, like a much better way. And there exactly people working at the lower part, okay, above this huge heap of dirt. You can see kind of a wall of small stones. This wall actually almost 4,000 years old. This is a Canaanite, this is the fortification wall of the Canaanite city. To give you an idea, okay, how deep this site goes, in time. Now, we've been excavating for last, it's been 2 seasons from now, and the 3rd season is coming up next month, actually in the end of August already. And you see just a couple of pictures of people working and eating, after all, we have eat as well in the field. Now you see people are actually closed quite warmly because it was in the winter. We actually, there was a huge storm, Barbara, that literally swept us from the tell. So it could be both very hot or wet and really cold. It was really cold in February here. So the main reason we came there is actually to try, except to try and to reestablish the work that Albright did there. And in two words, it's important what he did there. Again, in very, very, very general terms. It was quite the first time that he actually excavated the tell one layer after another, and numbered. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to 10, and then he analyzed the little pieces of pottery, not only the complete vessels, but small pieces like handles and bases and ornaments, and especially the rims. And he actually built kind of a table. Yes, he made kind of a laws like in science. He said that types of rim A, B, C, D, and E should belong to layer 1. Then we have layer 2, then it will be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then layer 3, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Now, it seems almost idiotic, but like in every, idiotic thing, there must be one genius that comes first in order to understand the things, okay? That simple. He said, okay, so we have layer 1, by the way, this is one we're looking at, which today we know is dated to the days of Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah, which means that the pottery with these specific forms that we find in this layer, they belong to the late 8th century BC, or 9th century BC, or 12th century BC, it no matter. Then he goes to layer B, C, and D, and so forth, and so forth, and so on and so forth. But more than that, if so, because we have like hundreds of tells, and every tell has sometimes dozens of layers. So instead of starting our study of these tells, from zero, from the scratch, now we know that if we have layer 1 and it belongs to 8th century BC, when we go, for instance, to Lachish, it's a real study case, and we find the same pottery at the layer 3, we don't have to establish all the sequence of events from scratch. We know, based on the finds discovered at Tel Beit Mirsim, that layer 3, stratum 3 in Lachish is dated to the same period. And in such way, we can actually establish a whole network of of data through all the country, and sometimes even beyond. Sometimes when we study, for example, imported pottery from Cyprus or from Egypt, that we can actually make correlation between different sites. And we don't have to study, as I said, from the scratch. We don't have to study again and again every different tell, but we can actually quite quickly date every stratum based on the previous knowledge. And we may say, again, it's a generalization, but not too much. Generally, we can say that all this started here in this very site. And this is very exciting. And I must say he was quite genius. And even when he was mistaken, it was very rare. And generally, we still use the methodology and typology of pottery that he established. It's still in usage. It didn't change considerably since the 20s and the 30s when he excavated this site. And yet we have a lot of work to understand, various nuances regarding the stratigraphy of the tell, but it's less interesting, and people who will come here and to participate, they will know, every bit of this information. We still try to understand what's going on there. We only started this. But our specific project is really, right now, we're going to be here for 4, maybe 5, maybe more years. But we concentrate on this upper layer, layer 1, or layer A, as he called it. Again, the town of Hezekiah. Archaeologists today, they tend, in many cases, to excavate the big cities, the important cities like Jerusalem, Lachish, again, Gezer, where the center of the power is sitting. Well, all the important things are happening. But till recently now, it's less, but it's still so. The fringes of the country, with all the poor, simple people who work hard in the fields, who grow their children, people away from the center of the governmental power. Yes, the simple people, they were frequently overlooked. And we want to study a simple Judaic city at the peak of its existence. Again, Hezekiah, it's probably the maximum power of Judah of the first temple period, and try to understand what did they do, what did they produce, what did they export, what did they eat, not less important, who did they pray to. It's actually it's really interesting question. Who did they pray to? I mean, it's quite clear. It should be quite clear that we have God of Israel, Yahweh, but it's not that simple. I believe you're well acquainted with Bill Deaver. I think he was the first one to propose the existence of Asherah as the first lady of Judaic pantheon. Yes,
right. Based on those inscriptions found in the Negev.
We have at least 2 different inscriptions. One in the Negev, and the other one not far from Jerusalem, all praising Yahweh ve'Asherato, or God of Israel and his lady, his wife. In fact, she's mentioned many times in the Bible as being venerated by Israelites. In fact, it's quite logic. Like think of all these white privileged men, serving in the temple, but simple people, they have much more urgent matters. Women are really they try not to die, during the labor. Men, they want to get the good crops in the fields, and eventually you go with your instincts, and you remember that all our neighbors, every deity had a wife. So what is God of Israel different? And no matter how our prophets try to fight this this phenomenon, I don't think it worked.
That's why she's mentioned so often in the Bible, because the prophets had to keep reminding them. God does not. Yeah, and that's why her name was transformed into a pejorative, and why there's so many. well, or Astarte's name was transformed into, so was Baal's name transformed into a pejorative, Bosheth or Ashtoreth. But there's so many verses on warning the Hebrews not to worship the Baalim and the Ashtoreths. So
yes, and when we hear this, when you have a law not to do something, it's only because people do this.
right.
If you have a law, you shall not kill because people kill. You don't have a law, don't jump from the cliff, because people don't tend to jump from the cliffs, right? But people kill, and certainly people had different kinds of house cult. Most probably, at least some kinds of cult that were inherited from the other groups of people living around us.
Right.
And this is going to be one of the important objectives during this excavation. I think it's quite exciting to excavate what people really not believe in, because it's very, very possible that they did believe in God of Israel. It's even logical. But still, they did have a lot of practices that don't come along with, royal or temple Judaism.
This makes a lot of sense to me, Mike, because we just see in surveys here in the United States, there's a pollster by the name of George Barna who conducts surveys of American Christians. He's based at Arizona Christian University now, and we find that among American Christians, there are a wide range of beliefs, and many of these beliefs come from outside the Bible. Many of these are New Age beliefs, a belief in reincarnation, for example, or belief in, say, something called the law of attraction, which teaches that you can change reality by thinking about it, which is really kind of magic. Well, it is essentially magic. So these are the range of beliefs held by American Christians are not what we would find in the official teachings contained within the scriptures. And in the same way, you would find your average, everyday, working class Judean following a set of beliefs that did not come from, as you say, the temple priesthood and the prophets who were, that's what's contained in the scriptures. In a sense, excavating at Tel Bet Mersim seems to me like going out to where actual people are, as opposed to try to figuring out what your typical Israeli is like just by looking at what is going on in Tel Aviv or here in the United States. Figuring out what people here in our part of America, which is in the middle of the United States, we call the heartland, or what many call flyover country, the part of America that you fly over when you're going from New York to Los Angeles, because there's nothing that matters in between, except maybe Chicago. So if you want to know what real Americans think, you go to where the real Americans are, the small towns, the communities away from the centers of power. And it seems to me that that's exactly what you're doing at Tel Bet Mersim.
I think it's a very precise analogy. Yes, it's like the Midlands, so I don't know how I call them, the Mid-America.
Yes.
Yes. So just one, it's really it's really very, very, it's like a huge topic. Speaking of these local religions or Judaisms, if you like, and there's a lot of work to do, a lot done before us, and we hope to get new data from the site as well. But we start at the beginning. So you see, it's so far it's quite a small area that we started excavating, only, I don't know, a few hundreds of square meters, and we usually start at the fringe of the tell. And if you can see the numbers and the red squares and the picture, number one is actually kind of a strip. This is the city wall. We call it if you can see that, actually two parallel walls running from left to right, and they separated with partitions, making kind of a rooms, or we call them casemates. This is a casemate wall that could be used, that could be reinforced, in the time of war, which didn't help to these people actually in 701 BC, but well, clearly. But the rooms created in this way inside the wall could be used by people as in the daily life, This is the wall. It's typical to Judea in the earlier parts of the first temple period. It's a little bit late for our city. So there's a big dispute whether it was built in the time of Solomon or Rehoboam, as Albright thought, or it's actually dated to later times of Hezekiah or a little bit before. This is one more thing that we have to clarify in this excavation. Now, number two is, we call it a four-room house. You just have to trust me, it's four-room house. Number two, yes. So it's actually divided in three elongated rooms. You can see them from up to the to bottom, and one room running at the bottom of the picture from left to right. These are four compartments in the same house. It's again very typical for Israelite settlements in general and to Judah in particular. And this is, as I said, my colleague Igor Kramerman, he started excavating it in 2021. And now I'm continuing at the site. Now, as he finished the first season, you see number 3. He actually saw the upper part of two circular installations. I think you can see them just above number 3, like two huge circles. These are actually stone vats. And today we know that they were used to make olive oil. Olive oil, probably the most important merchandise in the First Temple period Judah. It was the most important, the largest part of exports of Judah. It was olive oil. Now, we continued excavating it in last winter, and we're going to accomplish the excavation of this unit, and we shall speak about this one as well. So all you see, all this huge installation, number 3, it was actually some kind of a factory producing olive oil. Again, this is the most important. It's more important than wheat and barley and everything else, because
even more than wine, huh? Even more than wine?
I think even more than wine. Olive gives you everything. The wood itself, it gives you charcoal for fire. It gives you olives to eat. It gives you oil to sell and to survive. Yes, it seems that most of it was not consumed by the people, but most probably was sold as taxes or as merchandise to other places. So it's really important to understand. Even we know that there were different kinds of olives, and now we actually finding olive pits. So I hope we're gonna understand what kinds of olives they used, because we know that some kinds were preferred to make for eating and some for preparation of oil. So we shall see what did they use. There was a lot of, now think that this olive press is used maybe 1 month a year, even less, somewhere in September. And what else? It will be empty for 11 more months. So possibly there were other activities in this place, like making dew, for example. We found for weaving, we shall see some evidence that we already found there, and probably many others. Okay, so these are the 3 units that we're going to accomplish the excavation in this season, and then we're going to run and excavate more 4 or 5 such units, and to gain more global understanding of of the life and production and economics and religious belief at the site. Again, it will take years, but it's really exciting work. One of the questions that was not yet answered, but it's something in making, if you like. It's actually, they say we are what we eat. What did they eat? For instance, for example, we find sometimes 5, 6 different kinds of cooking pots, at the same place, next to the same oven. Now, think of your own kitchen. If you have, if you cook same stuff, why preparing 5 different types of cooking pots? And they differ in size and shape and diameter of opening. So they definitely were used for different kinds of cooking. We have dozens of types of pottery found at the same site, seemingly of the same usage, but they definitely are not the same. So how did they use all this pottery? And this was actually the beginning, but now we are trying to establish much bigger picture of actually what did they collect in the fields, what did they grow, what did they breed, what did they cook, and what did they eat. And again, we find, from the beginning of archaeological research, probably, I don't know if millions, but hundreds of thousands of pottery vessels. But with very rare exceptions, we have no idea what was cooked or kept inside or eaten inside them. So today we have new technologies, and like residue analysis technologies, like gas spectroscopy and others. And if we are lucky enough, then because it doesn't always survive inside the vessels, we are sending now dozens of vessels, and this site is really unique. Speaking of, the level of preservation of the vessels, sometimes, like in many instances, you find just complete vessels standing next to the walls. Sometimes, look at this guy at the bottom of the picture. Vessels still inside other complete vessels. It's unbelievable. Okay, it's really something else. So we're sending these vessels to the laboratory. By the way, located not far from Hebron. It's everything stays in the family, and we are trying to establish what was in all these vessels. Sometimes you have tiny. I'll show you a few pictures. Sometimes we have tiny juglets. Definitely were used for some, for some expensive, in expensive materials. Some of them are really rude and large for cheaper stuff, but both cheap and expensive, they all interest us. We want to understand, and we collect and sieve through water. We call it flotation. Hundreds of buckets collected from the floors, and we find seeds. We can find seeds surviving for last 2,800 years. And we already know we have wheat and barley, which is logical but nice to know. Expecting to find olives and maybe some other types of production like hummus, the chickpeas. Why not?
Sure.
Again, we didn't find yet, but again, we're gonna see what they have there. And again, examining the bones of the animals. We collect all the bones of the animals, and they will be examined in the laboratory. And by the way, even today, we know that statistically speaking, in Israelite and Judaic sites, we do not find swine bones.
Right.
Okay, there's always a guy who was, boiling a pig rib somewhere in the corner. But generally speaking, especially in, relatively to Philistines, we don't really find swine bones. Like this one was really observed. And there's so many angles that we're going to look at the diet of these people from. And this is going to be one of the major goals of this excavation. Yes, what did they eat and what did they believe in? And how did they count the barley in the storehouses?
One of the favorite types of entertainment that we have, on television, and I'm not talking just about Sharon and me, but people in general are watching police television shows, detective programs, what we call police procedurals, where we see how they solve the crime. It strikes me that what you're doing is very much like a forensic investigation to try to basically, the scene of the crime, as it were, to untangle it and say, okay, this is what happened here, and we know this because of the evidence that we've uncovered. It's like being a detective.
In a way, but with a slight difference, because when you're a detective and you come and you find a corpse and you study it precisely, and then you ask people who are passing by, but in our case, think of the body that was burned down, that was taken, and there was there was a regiment of tanks just passed through this area, and then everything was bombed, and then you have to come and to figure out what happened. So this is the difference.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And all the people around are dead as well, so you have no one to ask. Parallel, but it's
the good news is, though, as you get closer to answering or solving the crime, you don't have a criminal or a villain who wants to stop you from solving the crime. So it's like being a detective without having to worry about getting shot.
Well, it's archaeology, mostly. Yes, mostly. You know that the first archaeologist who excavated Lachish was actually murdered on his way from Hebron to Jerusalem.
Oh,
Leslie Starkey. He was on his way in 1938 for the opening ceremony of the Rockefeller Museum, and his car was stopped just north from Hebron. He was taken out from the car and shot in his head.
Oh.
Archaeology could be quite dangerous,
Well, yeah, especially in the 30s before 1948 and independence.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yes, but generally, yes, all the murders are not with us anymore. That's the good thing. You're not going to be put on stake by Assyrians. That's for sure.
There you go.
Yes. So here you can see this production site. This is the place where the olive oil was produced. So you see two huge vats cut in stone. Albright found many of these installations, and now we are excavating one of them. It's much more precise way, again screening all the dirt from underneath and trying to figure out all the details. One of the vats was used to crush the olives in order to release the oil, and then it seems that all the olives were put in special bags, reed bags, and put on the left vat, the one with a tiny hole, and then they were pressed by a beam. In Hebrew, the olive oil installation is called Beit Bad, or the house of Bad. Bad is actually this beam that was pressing on the olives, and you see in the middle of the picture, just between the two vats, you see big stones with the holes inside them. These are actually the weights that were connected to the beam to create more weight, and to make this procedure of of pressing the oil more efficient. Now, actually, we usually not usually. I don't remember whether this beam was ever found, so it's very plausible, but it was never found, in this context. It's made of wood, and unlike in Egypt, which is dry, we don't find any wood, very, very seldom. And as you see, this picture was taken in the end of the last season, and we have to dig another maybe, 6-7 inches, even less, to get to the floor. And this is going to be really exciting, what we're going to find on these floors. Okay, all the the waste or remains of this production. Now, there's another angle of this production site, and if you look, you see the red and white scale, and just above it, right's end, you see a strange black black line or black figure. Okay, going from top to bottom. This is actually the remains of this beam. So okay. I think it's maybe the first time in biblical archaeology, at least in the last decades, that we managed to find the beam itself. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to establish what kind of wood was used to create to make this beam. It was installed here, between the vats, and it was pressing on, through the weights. It was pressing on these vats, on the olives. It's really, really nice. Now, among different kinds of stuff, you can see that's a lot of vessels, pottery vessels were found complete. Now, in archaeology, it could be broken 1,000 pieces, as you see, at the top picture. But as long as you can, stick them and you can reconstruct the complete shape from the base to the rim, in archaeology is considered to be complete vessel. So it's a very strange, archaeologists are strange people, but for us, it's good enough. If we can reconstruct the shape of the vessel, we can know, in many cases, we can actually date it, yes, and to understand what period is dated to, or sometimes even which people created this pot, okay? Because they not only change from one period to another, but between different cultures, okay? You can see here a couple of vessels. You see the huge jar at the top picture, probably to put some grains, some cereals, or olive oil, or maybe wine. The question of wine is really interesting because how do you actually know that they did produce wine? Everybody likes wine. And again, Solomon said everything about it. You can now add anything to this. So one option is to find the residue of the right residue at the bottom of one of these vessels. The other one is actually to find seeds of grapes, which is possible, but it's very rare. It would be nice to find some grapes and to understand that they really, for example, just finished with the oil. So they start with crushing the grapes and making the wine. It's very, very possible. I hope we shall know this as well. Now, one of the most crucial points here is the administration. It's maybe the most boring, issue in archaeology, but one of the most important, because after all, kingdom, like in one word, is taxes. Based on taxes, you have the army, you have the control, you have all the, you have all the governmental life or state life. And how do we know that actually they had administration? First is the texts, and the texts are the best. Now, so far, we didn't find any letters or any documents, so we don't have any papyrus here. Yes, this kind of material doesn't survive in this climate usually, but we have something that is called ostracons, which is actually some kind of notes written on the on the pieces of broken pottery, usually written with help of ink, and sometimes they do survive, and they tell us loads of information about their life, including names, sometimes names that actually mentioned in the Bible, which is really exciting. So Albright didn't find any ostracons, neither did we, but again, we only start, and we hope to get some finds of this kind. It's not easy to find them because, again, ink is very fragile, and if we have to wash the pottery, without washing the pottery, we don't know what's under the dust. But if you press too hard while washing the pottery, the ink will not survive. You won't see it anymore. So you have to be very gentle while washing hard. So it's kind of a conundrum, but we hope we're going to find some texts. Sometimes these are actually sealings or official seals that bear sometimes name or symbols of production of the material kept in the specific vessel, or the name of the owner. So generally in this period of time, specifically in time of Hezekiah, they develop a kind of a very specific sealing. Usually there would be some kind of like a winged sun or scarab, and there will be word Lamelech, which is to the king, which means belong to the king, at the lower side, it will be one of the 4 general sites or cities, possibly where these taxes were collected. Hebron, Ziph. Ziph is mentioned, if you remember, at the fringe of the desert. This is where David was hiding from Saul, and biblical Soho. And one more place, it's really elusive, Mamshat. We have no idea what Mamshat is. One of the theories was actually that there is Lamed missing there, and it should be Mimshelet, which is in ancient Hebrew like the power or the government. And maybe they actually mean Jerusalem, which is strange that it doesn't appear, at these and these seals. Now, as we see here, the one that we found already with some geometric ceiling, kind of a net pattern. We still have no idea what it means. It's, I don't know, one possibility is that actually these people were so poor that they didn't even write, they couldn't even write, so they just, use some symbol between them. It's very possible. Although, again, in Judah, in this period, literacy is quite widespread. And in fact, so far, after all these seasons of excavation hours and albeit there was only one ceiling bearing a name found. Very interesting, though. I will show it a little bit later. And you see one more guy, a tiny jar. It's, you see at the left lower corner of the picture. You see the scale underneath. It's really tiny. You see 5 centimeters.
Oh yeah, yeah.
About 2 inches. Yes, it's really tiny. We sent it to for residue analysis, and it's going to be really, really interesting. What was inside? Who knows? Okay. By the way, just disclosure, disclaimer. I don't know. One thing that I'm looking for really hard is trying to find some narcotics. Okay, if you like, all these substances that help people to see beyond the line. If you remember, we discussed this, yes, but again, it's a huge thing, and we're just starting with this now, again, thanks to these new technologies, and we already have some results. Maybe you guys heard that in biblical Arad, there was kind of a tiny Judaic temple, and they found remains of cannabis on one of the burners.
Right.
Which is only logical, speaking, with tongue of Spock, but still, it's very exciting to find all this.
Sure.
By the way, it was found along with Levona in the Bible or frankincense. They come together in the Bible as well. It's really, really interesting.
That is very interesting. Put that in the burner, and then pretty soon you are seeing things, or at least more relaxed, so that you may be open to
more relaxed. They're not really hallucinogenic, but we have other materials, and it's still not time to discuss this. But I really, really hope that future seasons to come they will reveal us more results in this field.
Right. You would assume that a jar that small, just a couple inches across, would probably contain something that is very, very potent. So you would not need much.
It could be not that provocative. It could be just very expensive oil, for example.
Sure.
Okay. In the Bible, you have different levels of quality of oil. The best oil would go to the temple itself. The others, different usages. But it could be some expensive oil, maybe something that women use to make themselves more beautiful.
A very expensive perfume, perhaps.
Maybe. When it's about women, I'm so careful. I have no idea how it works. It's really a pure mystery for me, even today. But it could be, yes. As I said, this is the wonderful feeling, the beginning of this project, relatively in the beginning, when you know that exciting things are waiting for you already, but you're still waiting for the answers. It's really like this police show. Yes, you know there's a murder, but you still don't know who murder is. Okay, so speaking of what did they do and their houses, so we have first answers already. you see all these bowls with a hole inside. Okay, in fact, we found hundreds of them already, and these are actually weights of the looms. And
Okay.
So-called vertical loom, when you have few dozens of weights holding the thread, and it's usually a lady working there, so she can actually create a shroud. And one of them, it's a feeling, but we have still checked the context, but it seems that one of them fell down from the roof when all the building collapsed, which really interesting. Sometimes, these are little details that turn, the biblical picture so vivid. You can see, by the way, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that the roof is more than just, covering protecting the room from the rain. People actually live there. And by the way, being here in August, you can perfectly understand this. You turn down the air conditioning and you die in 5 minutes inside the room. Okay, the temperatures are terrible inside. So what is better than sit on the roof, put a tent, and you have perfect breeze? You can work, you can wash. Remember, like this lady in Jerusalem and David, Bathsheba?
Yes.
And if you remember Peter coming to Jaffa and he went to sleep on the roof of that specific house of this tenant. We have evidence accumulating when you find stuff like even altars found on the roofs of the houses in Judea, and you cannot not to remember the words of the prophets. If you remember, they blame Israelites who burned the incense for the sun and moon and all the army of heaven. How did it go? Yes, clearly on the roofs of the houses. So this is really cool, really beyond all the scientific things. When you actually excavate the Bible, okay, again, you have to be very careful these days with this, but these little things, they're really, really exciting. So these looms are coming out, and we're still collecting these weights. Again, we try to understand and to write down the exact context of every weight, and then to try to reconstruct them, the process of falling down, and then to understand where did they stand, what did they do with them. One of the more, really emotional things, if you look to the left, you see the kind of a bowl, complete bowl with a red arrow pointing at this. And it's not very well visible here, but inside the bowl, we still found a bone of a sheep or a goat, most probably. It's like the last meal. Think of this. Again, we're still processing the data. It will take some time. But if we, being carried away a little bit, you can actually see this guy with, with the last meal before running away from the Syrians. Again, maybe I'm too dramatic. I don't know. But you have this feeling here because he actually left some of his food in the bowl, just, put it on the table or on the floor and escaped for good. They never came back. It's so it's really like the Last Supper, if you like, the last meal. And again, I told that we barely found any inscriptions in Tel Beit Mirsim. So Albright was the one to find what you see here is actually a sealing of a stamp that was stamped into a handle of a pottery vessel. Most probably to mention the owners of this oil or wheat or whatever there was inside the vessel. Now, actually, you see how the ancient Hebrew of the First Temple Hebrew looked like. And it's actually says that it did belong to Eliakim, or the guy, his name was Eliakim, Na'ar Yochan, or Na'ar in modern Hebrew is like a boy or a young lad or something like this. But actually, in this context, it should be like quite high-ranked official. Just like Eved or in ancient Hebrew is a slave, but actually in many contexts, when we find them in inscriptions, actually it's not slave. It's actually quite an important person. This actually was quite a story because Albright wanted to see, actually, he tried to establish that this upper stratum that we are excavating now did belong actually to the destruction of Judah by the Babylonians in 586 BC. When he read this inscription, this Yohan, he actually read as Yoachin, or Joachim actually is one of the last kings,
right.
very end of Judaic kingdom. Once he established this, and he understood that the whole pottery assemblage and all the houses and the walls of the stratum actually should belong to the end of Judaic kingdom, which is 120 years later than actually was. And this specific sealing actually brought to the wrong understanding of this period of Judaic history in all the biblical archaeology for decades. Because once we know that, once we maybe erroneously, but still, we decide that this is the last king of Judah, one of the last kings of Judah, then all the assemblage of pottery should be dated to, to the 6th century BC. And if so, then all other strata in all other tales in Israel should be dated to this period. This is how it works. It's like it's a perfectly logical method that he created, but once you make a mistake, okay,
it shifted everything off by about 120 years.
So, for example, that's why many, if not all, scholars believe that that actually Lachish 3, the third stratum, the very important stratum, actually, which shared the same pottery with Talbot Mirsim A, it should be dated to this period, like 120 years later than it actually was, and many other sites as well. So it just gives you a very curious case of how science works. Yes, when it works, it's perfect, but when it doesn't work, that it actually can cause such misunderstanding and wrong interpretation, expanding in time and space. So generally, it was very, very slight glimpse. Yes, to sum up. So we only started the excavation. And again, we only now finishing the excavation of the first big unit, including the part of the city wall, the house that these people lived inside. They kept their merchandise inside. They probably prayed inside. They cooked inside. And just the next door, they had the little family factory, okay, producing oil and maybe other substances, other kinds of merchandise that I hope we shall find out. And in this way, we're going to excavate, house after house, installation or facility after facility, and we're going to discover the fringes, as you said, the mid-America of Judah of 8th century BC, of time of Hezekiah, to see, the man behind the pot, the man behind the jar, how the simple people lived, cooked, ate, died sometimes. We have quite a graveyard around the city, also waiting for us to continue the investigation. How they prayed, who did they pray to, maybe what did they smoke, who knows, all this stuff. And in this way, we're going to try to reconstruct the everyday and not only everyday life, and eventually also to understand in the better way the picture of destruction. This is really, I barely spoke about this, but it's a very important, again, aspect. These events that led to destruction, not only of Bet Mirsim, but 50 villages and cities across Judah, conducted by Sennacherib. So the life and death of Talbot Mirsim, all this is waiting for us. And again, like in 2 words, we're really waiting for volunteers to come. We already have some people who come years with us, but we're always waiting for more. And I think it's going to be really exciting for both sides, for us and for you guys. And I really, really hope you to meet there. And by the way, you can travel through the books, videos, or even through Israel as much as you like. But in order, yes, if you really want to understand, the biblical context, you have to come and become dirty. And you will be dirty, that I can promise. This is really nothing can you can never gain this experience otherwise than through the excavation. And I really hope to see you guys. And generally, that's it about Talbot Museum so far.
Well, we certainly are looking forward to seeing you next spring when we bring our Israel tour. But just to be clear, you can use volunteers in the field in this season later in August.
Yes, definitely. It's a little bit, it's quite a short, announcement, but generally, definitely, yes. We have place, and if some people are, can come that fast, we definitely, you're most welcome. Yes. But today we are planning to conduct 2 seasons every year, 2 weeks in winter and 3 weeks somewhere in August, September. By the way, it's not that hot at the site. It's quite high. Hebron is it's Hebron area, so it's quite high. There's always night breeze in this area. Like, it's not that deadly as it sounds. Maybe I was too dramatic here. Yes.
So if as you say, short notice for this season, but you're also working ahead for the next couple of seasons. So you've got other periods where if people are interested in volunteering, but they need a little more time to organize and plan.
Of course. As I said, we have plans for the 4 years from now on, and we're really hoping to make this excavation much larger and more significant with years. There's only one danger here, that once you come from to excavate, you cannot get rid of this. I mean, you will stay there forever. You will come every year. That's yes. It's like being a junkie. Yes.
Well, we've talked to some volunteers who've been working over in Jordan at the site of Tal El Hammam, and they tell us that that is exactly what happens once you begin the process and you see the secrets beginning to emerge from the ground as they dig. They find themselves, it becomes a part of their annual routine. Okay, well, it's March, time for us to fly to Tel Aviv and make our trip over to Jordan or what have you. You can't dig a garden in Israel without running across archaeology, which is why there's so many salvage operations that have to take place. You dig a new road, you put up a new building, and suddenly, we've hit Iron Age ruins. We've got to call in the archaeologists to find out exactly what this is. And I'm looking not just at Talbot Museum and following in the footsteps of William F. Albright, one of the best known, if not the best known, of the biblical archaeologists, but you also, in your work on the megalithic structures on the Golan, you have followed in the footsteps of people like Moshe Hartal and Claire Epstein, and have come to some very different opinions as to their views. We'll talk about that in a future program, but God bless you for being willing to follow in the footsteps of those pioneers who blazed the trail and follow up with their work to further elucidate it. I mean, again, this is not as famous a site as perhaps the site of Jericho, Kathleen Kenyon and her work there, or excavations in the city of David, or even the mysterious megalithic structures that were the subject of your dissertation. But this is really significant, as Albright sort of established the framework for understanding biblical chronology.
Definitely, yes. And again, they were the giants. Now we made like 95% of the, like, we always criticize them because, when you do such a tremendous work, so you're going to make, tiny mistakes here and there. But now when we, when you criticize this type 5B, B, and C, that he was mistaken there, but we forget that actually he established, the whole field. And this is really exciting. So I don't say we're going to fix him, but we're going to upgrade his study. I hopefully, yes, it's been, but I really hope that we can add more knowledge to what he already done in this really exciting place.
Yeah. Talbet Mersim, check the show notes below this, whether you're watching this video or listening to this as a podcast. In the show notes, I will include links to the just an explanation of the site, but also to Dr. Freikman's page at academia.edu. As he told us when we saw him at Rujam El Huri, we are the people who read his papers. So, Sharon and me, Doug Van Dorn, and a few others who, and I've got to say, it really is an honor to have you on this program because we have made a real study of your work, especially regarding that, but your work here and also at Tel Kaiafa is so important in helping us to understand that, as you say, when you're trying to do biblical archaeology, even those who don't really believe in the supernatural aspect of the Bible understand that you cannot separate the history that's in it from what you find in the ground. So I'll put contact information for you as well, your email for people who are interested in volunteering. And Mike, thank you again for taking your time out today. Check the show notes below this program, whether you're watching or listening, and you'll find a link to Mike's academia page. Also, his email address, which he tells me was correct in the Zoom presentation there. It was spelled Michel, M-I-C-H-E-L, by the university said they misspelled it, so now they make me French. So, but that is his correct email address. And if you're interested in volunteering and being part of the detective work that he is leading in Tel Bet Mirsim, contact him through that email address, and he would be more than happy to have your help, I'm sure. One of the things that we really appreciate about Mike, Sharon and I, Doug Van Dorn, really, and I've shared his papers with other friends as well, like Dr. Judd Burton, Dr. Aaron Judkins. He approaches this like a detective. Instead of just saying, okay, we found a few pieces of pottery here. Those are dated to the Middle Bronze, so the whole site must be Middle Bronze. For example, with Gilgal Refaim, he went and looked at the survey of the Golan Heights conducted by his predecessors, like Claire Epstein, another giant in biblical archaeology, and found that the workforce necessary to build something as large as Gilgal Refaim, which he estimates at about 66,000 tons of stone, compared to, say, Stonehenge, which has got about 25,000 tons. So this is bigger. Much bigger. You need a workforce that can physically go to the site, move these rocks into place, follow directions. You need engineers, you need overseers, foremen, if you will, to coordinate this workforce. So you need people living walking distance from the site. And there just isn't any, there weren't any settlements after the early Bronze Age. And even in the early Bronze, most of those were located too far away from the site. It was only when you go back to the Chalcolithic or the Copper Age, which is pre-3300 BC, when you had a workforce capable of putting this together. That's the kind of detective work that Mike Freikman does. And so if you're interested in a real experience and you've got the time and the physical ability to volunteer on a dig site, this would be a really, really wonderful opportunity. We're looking forward to seeing him again in the spring when we go back. Hopefully we can coordinate that when we go with Tim Alberino. So we'll tell you about that tour, how you can join us in Israel next March and early April. And also, we discuss how the legal strategy to impeach Donald Trump may actually blow back on Joe Biden. Oh, yes. Rid me of this meddlesome president and bless his pointy little head. Straight ahead on A View from the Bunker. Everyone learns differently, and that's why we write fiction.
It is. I find that some people love to read nonfiction, but there's something about fiction that psychologists say breaks that fourth wall. You no longer doubt what you're reading. You get so engrossed in the story that you learn. You can learn propaganda or you can learn God's truth.
Absolutely. So, yes, we write nonfiction books, but we are also using the gift of storytelling to try to teach spiritual warfare and spiritual truths. And during the months of August and September, we're offering all 10 of our novels at 20% off.
All 10 at 20% off? That's crazy.
That's right.
That is really, really a good deal. And now's the time if you want to buy gifts for birthdays or Christmas or whatever gift-giving season it is. It could even be Mother's Day next year. This is the time to save 20% on all of our fiction. And Derek's fiction is really, really good if you've never read it.
And Sharon's Red Wing Saga, 8 novels so far. She's hard at work on number 9. If you want to get engrossed in characters who are really grappling with the supernatural and trying to make sense of that world while teaching the divine counsel concepts that we try to communicate here, get involved in the Red Wing Saga. Again, all 8 of those novels, plus my 2 novels, The God Conspiracy and Iron Dragons, 20% off now only at our online store. That's gilberthouse.org/store. Driving the internet to think every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online, VFTB.net. Of course, all of the social media sites, which I will recite to you here forthwith on Twitter or, well, X now. X at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. We're trying out Threads, although Threads has proven to be nothing more than a poor X clone, but you'll find us there at Derek Gilbert as well. Also, Truth Social, Gab Me We Get Her at Derek P. Gilbert, and again on YouTube, youtube.com/GilbertHouse. But if you're subscribing there, please take a moment, download that free app to make sure that we are never canceled from you. The political situation here, I try not to get too political in this program anymore, just because it's a source of frustration, but ultimately, if you are a Christian, as I am, you have to, and Sharon has to remind me of this. I'm not trying to set myself up as an example to follow, because there are times when she has to pull me in off the ledge. Just remember, Psalm 2, why do the nations rage and imagine a vain thing? He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord holds them in derision. So just remember, when things seem to be going not the way you would choose, just remember these folks think they're winning, bless their pointy little heads. So don't despair. The Lord raises up whom he will. And, well, as we read in the book of Daniel, the Lord raises up kings and tears them down again. So if something happens that we don't like, God has allowed it for his reasons. So participate in the system. Yes, especially get active at the local level, especially if you've got kids in the school system. But let's not freak out, as Abraham Hamilton III over at American Family Association says in his program, what happens in your house is more important than who's in the White House. Now, that said, interesting, I follow the blog of Jonathan Turley. He is a law professor at Georgetown and not a fan of Donald Trump. He is a liberal, but he's also an honest legal scholar. And as a fellow Chicagoan, we grew up in Chicago around the same time, late 70s, mid-late 70s. We're both Cubs fans, so that's okay. He wrote an article this past week and pointed out that the legal strategy employed by the Justice Department, Special Counsel Jack Smith, may actually backfire on Joe Biden. That, according to the New York Times, as Turley pointed out, the New York Times wrote over a year ago that the White House, Biden and the White House staff were getting frustrated with Attorney General Merrick Garland in his slowness at indicting President Trump, former President Trump. And so Garland finally appointed Special Counsel Jack Smith, who, as you know, has indicted President Trump on 4 counts that the media would have us believe are connected to what happened on January 6th. Although, as Turley notes, it is important to point out that Trump has not been charged with sedition or seditious conspiracy. But of course, in Jack Smith's press conference, he connected everything to what had happened on January 6th. That's not what is in the charges. What's in the charges are things like basically claiming fraud. Essentially, what Jack Smith is trying to charge Trump with is making false statements. In other words, lying. That Trump can be prosecuted because he didn't believe what he said. Okay. I defy you to show a single politician from any point in history. Now, I'm not trying to defend what Donald Trump did or indict him for what he did on January 6th. It's a matter of public record that he told the people protesting to be peaceful. Doesn't matter. I mean, you wouldn't know that if you only watched CNN or MSNBC, but that is a fact. What he's apparently been indicted for are his actions afterward after the election, and trying to find some way of showing that the results were not as they were reported. So, thus the charges, and even friendly commentators have described the charges brought by Smith as novel, which is a nice way of saying that ain't nobody ever tried it this way before. And there's a reason for that. The First Amendment to the Constitution protects even false statements. Yes, unless you are lying to literally defraud somebody of their money or property, you can lie. And in the context of politics or in political campaigns, even the Justice Department, Biden's Justice Department admits that false statements made during political campaigns are protected by the Constitution of the United States. And yet, they're claiming that they can go ahead and prosecute him, President Trump, because he didn't really believe what he said. Okay. And herein lies the rub for President Biden. Biden conceded, according to Turley, that his own White House counsel, his own attorney, and his trusted legal advisors told him that renewing a national eviction moratorium, you remember during the pandemic crisis, they put a moratorium on tossing people out of rental properties because the economy had been crashed into the wall. Nobody could work. So they put there was a moratorium on evictions, and Biden wanted to extend it. But a White House counsel and his legal advisor said, you can't do that. You, as the president of the United States, do not have the constitutional authority to do this. And Biden admitted, yeah, they've been telling me I can't do this. But he found one guy, one Harvard attorney, law professor, that is, who said, yep, you can. And so he did. And of course, as soon as the case went to the Supreme Court said, no, you can't. Well, the fact is that Biden knew that what he was doing was unconstitutional, but he did it anyway. He didn't really believe that he had the authority to do it when he did it. So couldn't he be prosecuted on the same grounds that Trump is being prosecuted? Yes, he could. That's Turley's point. And that's not even getting into the allegations over what Biden claims he didn't know about Hunter Biden's business dealings, which even the Washington Post, CBS News, and other corporate media outlets admit. I mean, the New York Times, as we told you a week ago, now reporting that, it's long been known that Biden associated with his son's business partners and so forth. Despite Biden claiming that he had no knowledge of his son's, but we know that that's not true. So when Biden was telling us that he didn't know any of this stuff, he didn't really believe what he was saying. He was just lying. And if Trump can be prosecuted, indicted by a federal prosecutor for lying, then, boy, the door has been opened for House Republicans to impeach. Now, it would never pass the Senate, but again, in his sincere desire, his intense desire to be, and this is a reference to Henry II and Thomas à Becket, will no one rid me of this troublesome former president? Okay, well, they're trying to rid him of that, but in so doing, they're giving legal weapons to House Republicans to impeach the guy who set his White House staff on getting rid of the former president. Bless their pointy little heads. Well, I'll tell you what, we are coming into a political season that is unlike any in my 6 decades on this planet. Just remember, as Christians, this is not how salvation is won. So let's not get too caught up in this. At the end of the day, play with your children, hug your wife, scratch your dogs, and relax. Well, coming up, we're going to be in, or I am anyway, Sharon's going to be hard at work on book 9 of the Red Wing saga. And at the end of October, I'll be traveling to my mom's home state in North Dakota for the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering. That is the small farm, really trade show, but I'll be giving a couple of talks on Friday, October 27th, Saturday, October 28th in Valley City, North Dakota. I believe this will be at the Eagles Club in Valley City. We'll get confirmation of that here, and I'll pass it along to you as soon as I get it. You can always find our upcoming events at our app or website, gilberthouse.org. Look in the right-hand column there. We've got a calendar of upcoming events there. Yeah, looking forward to seeing North Dakota. I have not seen it since I was 16 years old. And again, long history in that state. Mom's ancestors got there about 130 years ago. They emigrated, actually, ironically, they emigrated from the part of Ukraine that is being fought over right now, Germans, but they emigrated to Ukraine at the invitation of the descendants of Catherine the Great. Anyway, October 27th, 28th, Valley City, North Dakota for the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering. More information at our app and the website, gilberthouse.org. And of course, next spring, you can join special guest Timothy Alberino, his lovely wife Jasmine, Sharon, and me in the Holy Land as we take you on a tour of Israel that is like no other, because we go places where even the roads don't go. Gilgal Refaim for one, Joshua's altar for another, and of course all the sites that you want to see, like the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the Mount of Olives, and so on. Get information online at gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com. That takes you right to the Lipkin Tours website where you can put down your deposit, reserve your spot, and we look forward to seeing you in the Holy Land. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen to this podcast, wherever it may be. If at YouTube, God bless you. Subscribe, share, and then download our app. But Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are sold, thank you. Our announcer is D.C. Good, the inimitable D.C. Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries and released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.